Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday, but after my husband's death 3 years ago, it became the loneliest day of the year. Our daughter lived in California, too far to visit every year. So that Thanksgiving night, I sat alone at my dining table, picking at a turkey I cooked purely out of habit. Around 8 o'clock, someone knocked at my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I live in this farmhouse 5 miles outside of town, down a dirt road nobody uses unless they are lost. I thought maybe it was a friend checking on me, so I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the door. As I opened it, I was surprised to see a boy about 16 years old standing on my porch, trembling in the cold. He was wearing torn jeans and a filthy shirt that hung off his thin frame. His bare feet were caked in mud. But above all these things, I noticed his eyes. Something about his stare didn't seem normal. He asked if I had any food, said he hadn't eaten in days. His voice was flat, but the way he stood with his shoulders slumped and his hands hanging limp at his sides made me believe him. I welcomed him in. He followed me to the dining room without a word, moving with a strange shuffling gait. I pulled out a chair for him and filled the plate with turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and cranberry sauce. He sat down and stared at the plate for a long time before picking up the fork. But instead of devouring it like a starving kid should, he lazily pushed the food around. He lifted bites halfway to his mouth, then he'd set them back down. I asked him if he didn't like it, or preferred I make him something else. He said the food was so overcooked that it had ruined the meat. For the rest of the meal, he just sat there staring at me, flashing a creepy grin. I started to feel uncomfortable and regretted letting him in. Sorry, but I can't let you stay here any longer. You'll get motels down the road. He stood up slowly, still staring at me with those unblinking eyes. I got up too and backed toward the door. All of a sudden, I was really aware of how quiet the house was and how far the nearest neighbors lived. After what felt like forever, he turned and walked out without uttering a single word. I locked the door immediately, checked all the windows, and promised myself I'd never be so stupid to let a stranger in again, no matter how pitiful they looked. I went to bed, but couldn't shake the image of the boy and his weird demeanor. Around 2 a.m, I woke to screaming of my chickens. Sometimes coyotes sneak into the barn, and I thought it was exactly that. So, I grabbed the flashlight and exited the house. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed the white and brown feathers scattered across the grass, leading a trail toward the barn. It made no sense for the feathers to be there. With my heart pounding in my chest, I followed the trail. The barn door was wide open, hanging crooked on its hinges. Inside, it was quiet except for a low humming. I stepped inside and swung the flashlight toward the sound. It was that boy. He was crouched in the corner with his back to me. He rocked slowly as he hummed the old tune in low rasps. I knew the tune. My grandma used to sing it at harvest time. I called out loudly, asked what he was doing. He stopped rocking. Everything paused for a few seconds, then he turned his head all the way around and grinned. His face was skinless. Where his face should have been, there was just raw meat and slick veins catching the light from my flashlight. Those wide eyes were still there, staring, but they sat wrong, sunken deep into exposed muscle. Something dark dangled from his mouth as he kept chewing. Then slowly, his jaw stretched open, and I could clearly see the limp wing of one of my chickens. He was eating my chickens alive. The thing was still moving inside his mouth. Blood covered his chin and neck, soaking into his shirt. Feathers clung to his face and fingers. When he smiled at me again, I watched the exposed tendons flex and pull beneath where his skin used to be. I don't remember dropping the flashlight. I just remember running back to the house like my life depended on it, because it did. I hit the door so hard it rattled the frame, threw the deadbolt, and grabbed for my phone with trembling hands. The 911 operator asked what the emergency was, and I tried to tell her about the boy, his face, and my poor chickens. I sounded insane even to myself. She said officers were on their way. I sat in my kitchen with every light on, clutching a knife from the drawer to my chest. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers searched the property with their flashlights and radios. I watched from the window. When they came back, they told me the barn was empty, except for 3 dead chickens. All of them were torn apart. One was missing most of its flesh, eaten down to the bone. But they couldn't find any boy. Said there weren't any footprints except mine. They asked if I'd been drinking, if maybe I'd fallen asleep and had a nightmare. I showed them the feathers on the lawn and the blood in the barn, but they said coyotes could have done it. They told me to call if anything else happened and left. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, or the next. I kept seeing his hideous, inhuman face with its too wide smile for days. Couldn't walk into my kitchen without feeling his presence on the table where he sat playing with the food. It chills me to the bone to this day when I recall he said overcooking ruined the meat. I'm not even sure it was a human who showed up at my door that night. Maybe it was a skinwalker or something else, but definitely not a human. It was Thanksgiving, and the 3 of us were desperate to escape the family drama. So when Jake found this cabin somewhere in the old-growth forest online for dirt cheap, we jumped on it. We arrived Thursday morning and decided to hike before settling in for the night. The trail behind the cabin circled through dense woods. Ben led the way with his GPS, Jake complained about his cell service, and I took photos of the scenery. Everything was going all right. About an hour in, Ben stopped and said that he saw someone standing behind a big oak, maybe 50 yards off the trail. He claimed the dude was naked, except for a skirt made out of dried leaves, and maybe the lad was following us. But when Jake and I looked where he pointed, we couldn't see a thing. We laughed it off as one of Ben's filthy fantasies and kept moving. But about 10 minutes in, things started to get weird. We kept finding dead animal carcasses scattered on the trail. We saw a raccoon with its chest cavity open and the organs missing. A deer carcass hung upside down from a low branch, completely stripped of meat. Its bones were so clean, I could swear someone had licked them. It was filthy and disgusting, but nothing prepared us for the small bird skeletons hanging from the trees by thin threads, spinning slowly in the wind. They formed a pattern, like props for Halloween decoration. Jake said it screamed one of those cults crap he'd read on the dark web, about groups who venture out to remote forests to perform ceremonies. I suggested we head back, but Ben pointed out we were closer to the cabin than the car. We agreed to spend the night as planned and leave first thing in the morning. The trail eventually opened up to a clearing where the cabin sat. It was small and weathered but sturdy enough. We unloaded our supplies, made dinner, and cracked open some beers. Soon, the animals and birds were out of our minds. By midnight, we were pretty wasted. Jake and Ben had passed out on the couch, watching the football highlights on Jake's phone, while I took the bunk bed. My eyes were already half closed when Ben got up and stumbled toward the door, whistling some made-up song about needing to pee. The outhouse was about 30 feet from the cabin, a rickety wooden structure with no roof. I'd used it earlier and hated it. It felt too open and exposed, sitting there with nothing but night sky above. I was drifting back to sleep when I heard Ben's scream. Jake and I both jolted awake and ran outside. The outhouse door was hanging open. Ben was lying unconscious on the ground. We dragged him back into the cabin and laid him on the couch. He was breathing but wouldn't wake up. Jake slapped his face lightly, called his name, and sprinkled some water. After a few minutes, Ben's eyes snapped open. He let out another scream and scrambled into the corner, shaking like a 4-year-old. For a while, he couldn't get any words out, just gasped and kept pointing towards the door. Finally, he managed to tell us what happened. He said he'd gone out to the outhouse and was just standing there, looking up at the stars while he finished. Then, as he went to flush, something wet dropped on his shoulder. At first, he thought it was sap, maybe some bird crap or rain starting up. But when he looked up again, he saw a bald-headed face with bright eyes staring down at him. It looked like the naked man from the trail, and he was taller than the outhouse ceiling, so tall that his neck was almost hunched, looming over the empty roof, staring down at Ben. He was drooling and panting like a dog. Ben said the man had razor-sharp teeth and was constantly salivating, staring at him like he was food. He screamed, and that's all he remembered before blacking out. Jake said Ben must have spooked himself, maybe saw a bear or a large owl, and his drunk brain filled in the rest. But Ben seemed pretty sober to me. The fear in his eyes was real. We locked every door and window, pushed furniture against the entrance, and turned on every light in the cabin. Suddenly, coyotes started howling from multiple directions at once. Like many of them were out there and they were circling the cabin. We sat in the living room with our backs to each other, watching the windows. Jake had grabbed a kitchen knife. I held a fireplace poker. Ben was clutching his steel water bottle. The howling continued for hours. And around 3 a.m, it stopped, only to be replaced by a woman's shrills and wails for help. Yes, something was calling for help. The voice felt too desperate to get us out of the cabin, but we didn't move. It continued for maybe 10 minutes. Then it stopped. We sat in silence until dawn started creeping through the windows. As soon as it was bright enough to see, we grabbed our stuff and ran to the car. We didn't bother packing properly, just threw everything in the trunk and got the hell out. The drive back was mostly silent, but as we passed the trailhead where we started hiking, I looked into the woods, and there, standing behind the same oak tree Ben had pointed at the day before, I saw a man. He was impossibly tall and almost naked, except for a skirt made out of dried leaves. His face was hidden behind the branches and shadows, but his red eyes shone through. And as we drove away, I could tell he was smiling. I didn't mention it to Jake or Ben. We never went back to those woods. Ben had to see a therapist for months afterward. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I hear the howling. And I remember the way that thing looked at me from the trees with nothing but hunger in its eyes. I'd been looking forward to Thanksgiving at Uncle Robert's orchard all year. The place was beautiful in November, with those endless rows of apples stretching across rolling hills and crisp air smelling like earth and fruit. My cousin Emily and I were supposed to pick apples for the pies while the adults started cooking the grand Thanksgiving feast. We headed out around 6 in the morning when the sun was barely up. The orchard looked different in the early light. It was darker, with shadows between trees that seemed longer and deeper than usual. Emily brought 2 baskets, and we wandered down the rows as we compared apples and argued about which ones were best for pie. I was enjoying the moment when I suddenly spotted a woman standing about 30 feet away. She was hiding among the trees. At first, I thought she was one of the farmhands Uncle Robert sometimes hired for harvest season, but something about her felt awfully creepy. Her posture was too rigid, like she was trying too hard to look natural, and her stare felt too invasive. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw more details that made my stomach turn. Her hair was patchy and ripped out in clumps, leaving bare scalp visible in places. The skin on her face sagged weirdly, like it had been stretched over something that wasn't quite the right shape. She smiled at us, and it was the worst smile I'd ever seen in my whole life. Her mouth moved, but nothing on her face did. The flat and empty smile didn't reach her eyes. Emily grabbed my arm and whispered, "Let's go back to the house." Before we could move, the woman giggled and skipped closer to us. "Hi, girls. Would you like to play hide and seek with me?" I swear, her voice scared me. Panic hit me like ice water. Something about her felt deeply wrong. Emily and I started running without answering her. Behind us, I heard footsteps and giggles. She wasn't running, but skipping, and the sound bounced off the wet grass. We raced through the rows of trees, forgetting all about our baskets and the apples. Branches scraped our arms, and the cold morning dew soaked through our shoes and jeans, making every step heavier. My lungs burned. I risked a glance back and nearly fell over. She was closer than she should have been, moving between the trees in ways that didn't make sense. We'd run down row 7, but she appeared at the end of row 8, then suddenly behind us again. Emily was crying, gasping for breath. We cut through the rows diagonally, trying to lose her, but every time I looked back, she was there with her horrible, sagging face and empty smile. The farmhouse finally came into view. We tore out of the orchard and sprinted across the yard. Our shoes were soaked. It made the porch steps slippery. We climbed up, and I fumbled with the handle. It felt jammed shut. I tried again, harder this time. I looked over my shoulder, and she was right behind us, just a few feet away. I swear I could feel her cold breath on the back of my neck. Just as her fingertips brushed my hair, I yanked the door and we threw ourselves inside. I slammed the door and locked it. Emily collapsed against the wall, hiccuping. My aunt came out of the kitchen, asking what had happened, why we were back so soon. I opened my mouth, but words refused to come out, so I pointed a shaky finger at the window. The woman was right there, standing at the kitchen window with her face pressed against the glass. Her skin looked even worse now. It was pale and waxy, with patches that looked like they were peeling away. Her breath fogged the glass as she grinned. Then she raised one hand and waved at me. Her fingers were bent at unnatural angles. I screamed. My aunt rushed to the window, but by the time she looked, the woman was gone. Uncle Robert came running from upstairs, and my parents from the dining room. Emily and I were bombarded with questions we couldn't answer. We tried to explain what we'd seen, and they listened patiently, but I could tell nobody believed us. Uncle Robert said he didn't hire anyone this year, and the orchard was closed to outsiders. My dad suggested maybe we saw a scarecrow and got spooked in the early morning light, but Emily and I knew what we saw and had barely escaped. Uncle Robert walked out to the orchard with my dad to check. They came back 20 minutes later, saying they found our baskets with the apples, but they couldn't see anyone else. We spent the rest of Thanksgiving inside. I kept watching the windows, expecting to see her face pressed against the glass again. We left the next morning. My parents said I seemed shaken up, and maybe the country air wasn't agreeing with me. On the drive home, I stared out the back window at the orchard disappearing behind us. And there, at the edge of the trees, I saw her one last time. She was standing, still as a ghost. She grinned at me with a wave, as if we were best friends. That was 6 years ago. I'm 20 now, living in the city. I haven't been back to Uncle Robert's orchard since. Emily won't talk about it. Whenever I try to bring it up, she changes the subject or leaves the room. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of apple trees and walking through dark rows in the early morning. And in those dreams, I always hear the brittle voice behind me, asking if I want to play. I always wake up before I turn, because some part of me knows that if I see her face again, that stretched skin and empty eyes, I won't wake up at all. She'll still be there, pressed against the glass, grinning and waving, and waiting for me to come back and play.